Mm, First of all, thank you everyone for coming for the morning meeting today. So I'm gonna give you a little synopsis on Bob. He sent me something. I'll read it out, and then I'll tell you a little bit about how I got sort of connected to Bob. Bob Miller is captain and navigator of Team Canada Adventure, a veteran of 30 plus expedition length adventure races, four-time Adventure Racing World Series event winner, ranking as high as fourth in the world. Plotting a route or planning an event, Bob thrives on getting the details right. The original Eco Challenge inspired Bob towards a life and career filled with adventure. He lives in the Blue Mountains areas with his wife and two young sons. He operates an event managing company focused on the outdoor endurance sports market. Bob and his team, Canada Adventure, participated in the world's toughest race, Eco Challenge Fiji, alongside 66 other teams representing 30 countries. The show is now streaming on Amazon Prime. So, you talk about superheroes. Bob is a superhero. And I'm in awe of what those people, these 66 teams did. And if anyone hasn't watched Amazon Prime show A World's Toughest Race, it is something unreal, like ultra marathon runners doing something unbelievable. So I'm super excited for him to be here today and just share his story and take some time out of his life to showcase what he does. So thank you, Bob. I'm sorry we get to meet under these circumstances. I don't get to show you my face, but hopefully at some point in the world we'll get to grab a coffee. Bob.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Zane, and thanks to Rotary for having me here to speak this morning. So, yeah, Zane had reached out and asked if I would maybe do a behind the scenes talk about our experience at the event. So I'll do my screen share, and for those who maybe haven't seen the show, I'll play a video from the show, and it was kind of a promotional video. And let's see if this works. Get the share going.
Yep. Yep. We've got you
And
on
can you
screen.
guys see the screen okay?
Yep. We can see the screen. And now you start your show. There you go. Perfect.
How are we doing? Looks all right?
Yep. It's great. Yep, Bob. It's all there. It's good.
Okay. Here's the video. Okay. Oh, Sorry, guys. I don't know
Okay.
why.
Uh, that's just the issue with Zoom. When you try to just show a video on Zoom, it doesn't
Yeah.
work. That's
Yeah.
why we request the videos ahead of time, but that didn't work out this time. So that's okay. Now you can continue with your presentation.
Oh, did you guys not see the video?
We see the video, but no sound at all. But
Oh, goodness.
that's why we request the videos ahead. But that's okay. Here we go. Now you can go on with your presentation.
Oh, well, that's too bad.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I'll fill in what you couldn't hear. I guess you saw a lot about what was going on with the event, but basically expedition races are multi-day. This event lasted 11 days, and they consist of any non-motorized disciplines. Typically, they're trekking, some type of paddle sport, mountain biking, that type of thing. So this event, as you saw, well, you saw, but you probably don't know where it was. To apply to take part in the event, it was run by Mark Burnett's production company. So Mark Burnett actually got his start in television. He's the fella who hosts shows like Survivor, The Voice, or The Apprentice, things like that you may have heard of. But he actually got his start hosting this show, Eco Challenge, back in the late 90s and early 2000s, and they brought the show and the event back. So we applied and we were accepted. This is our Canadian team. Let's see if we can get it up here. We're all looking quite intense in this picture here. So this was before the race in Fiji. They had us pose for some pictures. So yeah, we applied. So I'm in the center. My teammate to my left is Ryan Atkins. Ryan and I met while working on some events. As Dane mentioned, I do event production for a living, and Ryan and I were working on some obstacle course races. Ryan's actually one of the best obstacle course racers in the world. He's ranked first or second. So we'd always thought it would be great to do an event like an Eco Challenge together. My other teammate on my far right here is Scott Ford. He was our paddling expert, and Scott and I have quite a bit of history racing together. So I basically competed on what's known as the Adventure Racing World Series for about 15 years, from 2000 to about 2015. But I took time off. We were starting our family and I didn't have as much time. So I'd taken, 4 or 5 years off before they brought back the Eco Challenge race. But this was the race that got a lot of us started in the sport. So when they brought it back, I thought, we had to try and get a team in. So Scott and I had raced a lot in the past and in some past Eco Challenges in the late 90s. And then our female teammate was Rhea Coble. She was actually a friend of Ryan's from the obstacle course racing world. So that's Rhea. And then on my far left is Wayne Leake, and he was our support crew. So each team has a support person that meets them at different camps around the event. Wayne is actually the publisher for LCBO magazine. He lives in Toronto, but just a really great details guy. And if something needs to get done, he'll figure out how to do it. So that was our team that was accepted to participate in the event. And then this is a map of the course, and this will give you an idea of kind of what the event entailed. But basically it's an ultra endurance competition, but more so because it brings the team into play. It's a huge opportunity to showcase teamwork and working together as a team and getting through a difficult challenge. So we started the race on the East Coast over here, and there was a big paddle. Basically anything in purple is paddling, anything in red is trekking, and then anything in orange is mountain biking. So you can see it kind of span the length of the main island in Fiji called Viti Levu. So that kind of gives you an idea of the scope of the event that we were tackling. And each of the camps, you can see there's 4 camps along the way. So the course was kind of divulged in sections of 5. So we got the first section of the race at the start, and then we would race to Camp 1, and that's where we would meet our support crew and we would recharge for the next stage of the race. Was basically how things went. So this was moments before the start of the event. We basically slept in a soccer field the night before at a small village in the outskirts of Fiji. They woke us up at about 3 or 4 a.m. to get ready to proceed down to this start area, and we still had no idea what we were going to be doing. We knew the disciplines, but we didn't know the course. So they revealed this to us early in the morning, and then shortly after we got the introduction here, we went down to a river which was close by, and this was the start of the event. So we found out we'd be paddling these Kamikau canoes out into the ocean. So that's a picture from the start. So obviously there's quite a bit to talk about with an event like this. So I figured I'd kind of pick the highlight from each day and provide a synopsis of kind of how things went. So the first day was a big paddle and a trek out on an island. And what marked the first day of the event was the oppressive heat. It was incredibly hot in Fiji. And for those who watched the show, they focused on, I guess it was Team Ben really struggled with the heat. They were in the lead on that first day, and then ended up dropping all the way back to almost last place. And our team, I think every team struggled with the heat that first day. Our teammate Scott Ford came down with the early signs of heat exhaustion, and we did what we had to do to keep him moving and getting through the course. And a lot of people ask in the race, how do you pick your teammates, and how does that play out? And kind of what we always say is the biggest factor for choosing a teammate for an event like this is that they don't have an ego. So we mean, they're willing to speak up when they're suffering or when they need help, but they also are willing to give help unconditionally when it's required. And Scott was great on this first day. He started suffering heat exhaustion, and right away he let us know he was suffering, and the rest of us kind of kicked in and gave him our water and took his pack, and we regrouped and were able to keep moving quite well on that first day. So that was kind of the big takeaway from day one. So we did a big paddle up a river, and then we ended up stand-up paddle boarding a little bit, and then there was a big mountain bike which brought us to Camp 1. This is into day 2 of the event now. So after Camp 1, there was actually a canyon, and this is an image from that canyon. Now we're into day 2 of the event. And we were actually quite lucky. We were in the lead pack for the first day. We came into the first camp in second place, so we're doing quite well. But we got through this canyon here with the lead teams. But then the torrential rains came, and we were just there at the other side building some rafts. They were going to have us paddle down a river. But what this did to the race is it totally split the field. So the torrential rains came and it flooded out this canyon completely, so teams could no longer proceed up the canyon. The waters came up really high, and it made it they actually had to close the course for the night. So we got lucky. We were in the top 6 teams that made it through. And then the next discipline was something called billy rafting, which was where they had us make these bamboo rafts and paddle them down a river. So us and the other 6 teams paddled probably 3 or 4 hours down the river before they stopped us for the night. But what that meant was we had about an 8-hour lead on all the chasing teams. So it was really lucky to make it through that canyon on the second day and get into that lead. At that point, we had a good idea that likely the podium would come from the teams in that top group, the 6 teams that made it through. So unfortunately, with the torrential rains, it made some sections even more challenging. So here we're into day 3 of the event, and there was a long mountain bike ride, and it effectively turned this trail into a muddy mess where we had to almost carry our bikes for long stretches. to make it through. So it really started slowing things down, and especially for the teams chasing us. Also, on that third night, I guess it would be the third day into the third night, a lot of people ask about sleep and how much sleep do you take during the event. Because normally you're almost left to your own devices for when you want to sleep. But with this event, with Eco Challenge, they provided us with 5 basically sleep credits that we had to cash in during the event, and we would have to stop for 4 hours at a time. Well, because the event was stopped on the second night with the rainfall, we ended up cashing in 2 sleep credits. So we actually slept quite a bit on the second night. For an expedition race, we slept a lot. We probably got about 6 hours of sleep. And then on the third night, we ran into what they call a whitewater dark zone. So we finished that grueling mountain bike leg probably at about 11 o'clock at night. And the course was closed because of that dark zone. They don't let you whitewater paddle. It's too dangerous in the dark. So we got to sleep and cash in 2 more of our sleep credits. So with that lead group of other teams, we kind of all met up again before the whitewater rafting leg. And that also allowed the teams who didn't make it through the canyon to catch up a little bit as well, because we were stopped. But it's not normal to get this much sleep early in an expedition race. Normally you would try and sleep maybe 2 or 3 hours a night, because the goal is just to move as quickly as you can and get to the finish line as quick as possible. But that's kind of how the first couple of days played out. People often ask what was the most beautiful or spectacular part of the course, and I would say this whitewater rafting leg probably fit the bill. It was nice in the sense that we got to get off our feet for a little bit and let the river do the work of moving us along the course, and it provided a little bit of excitement. But these pictures give you a little bit of an idea of what that canyon looked like. It was just stunningly gorgeous. It was an unreal slot canyon where we could paddle the rafts. So that was definitely the highlight of, from a scenic standpoint, of the race. So now we're into the 4th day of the event, and we're still kind of hanging out in that lead pack. So the other question that's often asked is, about the highlights from the race. And a lot of people ask about the local Fijian people. And every team in the event will agree that probably the highlight from the event was the interaction with the locals. They were just unbelievable. The hospitality they showed everyone. A lot of them still live in remote villages, high in the hills. They have small schools in the villages, and we would have to pass through a lot of these villages during the event. And many teams took advantage of the hospitality, where they would let them sleep in their homes, or they would provide sustenance, and basically anything you needed, they were willing to help. And just an unbelievable outlook on life. The local Fijians, probably the most friendly culture I've ever experienced. And we really tried to take what we learned from them back with us into our everyday lives. So that was certainly a highlight of the event. And we really experienced that on the 4th day. They had a trekking section, and we were allowed to hire local porters basically to carry our equipment for us on this trekking leg. So a lot of people took advantage of that, and it was quite neat to take yourself out of the race and talk to the locals and, learn about their families and how they lived. And it kind of gave you a reprieve from the suffering that you were going through with enduring the challenge that they had laid out. So this brings us to what would be the 5th day of the race for our team. I don't think I'd mentioned yet, but they actually hosted an Eco Challenge in Fiji way back when the show used to air in the late 90s and early 2000s. And I was just getting started in the sport back then. And I was lucky enough to participate in that last Eco Challenge in 2002. And strangely enough, this course traversed the same section of, I guess it was like a canyon and a waterfall that they had us go through in 2002. And our team actually dropped out very close to where this picture was taken at the top of this waterfall. And they touched on this a little bit in the show when they talked to our team. But effectively, we contracted a really bad jungle foot rot in 2002. And we got to the top of this waterfall and it just got worse and worse on our feet. And within a day, we had to drop out because it became so painful. You basically, it was like walking on fire and glass. You just couldn't continue. And if you watch the coverage, they showed some teams suffering from this ailment. Probably the best picture was from the top of this waterfall, and the one teammate had to be kind of taken to the helicopter in a wheelbarrow fashion where she could only walk on her hands and they were holding her feet up just because it was so painful, which kind of gives you an idea of how hard it was. But people also ask what the most challenging part of the course was. This is a picture of me going up the rope section on the waterfalls there. But the section just after that climb was certainly the most challenging, and they focused on this in the coverage a little bit. But basically, we had to swim through really cold pools, and they would last anywhere from 800 meters to maybe just a couple hundred meters long. These cold pools. But the problem was the water was only about 10 degrees, and we'd been racing in heat for the previous 3 to 4 days. So when our bodies that were acclimatized to that heat now jumped into these pools, for about 10 seconds, it was refreshing. But shortly afterwards, you started feeling the effects of hypothermia, believe it or not, in Fiji. And it is a mountainous island, and we're probably up around 1,500 meters at this point in elevation, where these pools were, and they do see some snow up in this area during the year. So we had to swim through these pools, and it just was incredibly cold, and the rocks were incredibly slippery. So when it comes to the most challenging part of the course, this was definitely it from a physical standpoint. So these are just some pictures of how tough it was. And people sometimes ask, how do you deal with the physical toughness and the mental toughness? And we actually have some strategies that we employ to get through these sections. And the saying is kind of cheesy, but really it's when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And we really actually take that to heart in these sections, because when it does get really tough and you start to suffer, we think to ourselves, well, if this is hard for us, it's going to be, just as hard for everyone else. And this is where we really have to focus and try and keep racing and pushing hard. So it's easier said than done, of course. So we implement some other kind of mental strategies. And the next one is just not to be negative. This is a really hard thing to do, but any type of negativity that comes into your team, whether it's complaining about, being tired or sore or whatever it is that's creeping into your mind, you have to do your best to try and push that aside. Because once negativity creeps into a team, it really quickly brings the team down, and it's hard to reverse that mental outlook. So we always try and remain positive on the course. And that was one thing that the volunteers and the race staff mentioned about our team. We always seemed that we were quite happy. And I think that really helped us in this race, was maintaining that positive attitude. And then just one final point on the mental aspect. These things are easy to say, but when you're in the moment and you're really suffering and it's going on and you're not sure how you're going to keep going, we kind of have a mental reset that we do where we really take a moment and we stop and we think about why we're there and what brought us there and all the sacrifices that our families have made and how we're wanting to make them proud. And it really helps with your mental outlook on participating and keeping going and doing well in the event. I used that strategy many times in this race, and I was just constantly telling myself to enjoy the experience and the surroundings, as tough as it was. But I knew what our family had sacrificed for me to go there, and I really was telling myself to take it all in, and it really did help. It's amazing how the mental side of this sport really plays into it. So the hardest part of the course was definitely going through these pools. And here's a picture of my teammate Scott Ford. We're coming towards the end of these horrific pools. Scott actually lives locally as well. He lives just off Mountain Road, so he's another local guy that was on the team. So that brings us into, this would be the 5th night of the race, through the pool. So we trekked up that canyon, and then we had another stand-up paddleboarding leg, and then there was a large overnight trek that we had coming up. And we had, like I'd mentioned earlier, we were racing in the lead pack, and we were still in 3rd place at the start of this 5th night of the race. And things were going well. We were back on our feet, and trekking was the best discipline for our team. So we started this trek, and we found that the leaders were only, maybe 15 to 30 minutes ahead. So we thought, this is great. Let's keep pushing. And shortly we caught the 2nd place team. They had stopped to sleep early on the 5th night, and we were feeling good. So we pushed on, and shortly after that, we actually caught sight of the leaders, the New Zealand team. And then we were really excited. We thought, okay, this is great. We're getting hopefully close to the end of the race, and we're right with the leaders. But this is also when we made probably our worst mistake of the race. I was the navigator, and we struggled to find a trail that was to lead us out of this canyon and down into another valley. And we actually lost 5 hours due to a navigation mistake. They didn't really show this in the show. So we were wandering around in this tall grass jungly area, and we just couldn't locate this trail. There were tons of parallel trails that were kind of like little cattle tracks, and they kept leading us in the wrong direction. And then we tried to bushwhack through this stuff, and it just got too thick and it was cutting us up. So we had to kind of reverse course. So we're messing about in this area, and we finally get back onto the proper trail and we get going, but we've lost all this time in the middle of the night. And we actually had no idea how many places we might have lost because of this mistake. But another great thing with our team is, like I had mentioned earlier, was the positivity. And we basically said, okay, let's stop for half an hour. We'll take a half an hour sleep, because we were all struggling with sleep deprivation at that point. And then we'll reset and get going again. And it was amazing. The team rallied. We got up, probably 5:30 in the morning, and we just started running down these trails and up this river valley. And we got to the final camp of the race, which would be the 4th camp. And we found out we were still in 2nd place. And we honestly couldn't believe that we were still in 2nd place after that big of a mistake. But I really feel it was a testament to our team's ability to regroup from what was our biggest mistake in the race. So that takes us to Camp 4, which is over here. And this is where we got the final package of maps and instructions to get us to the finish line, because we didn't really know what was coming up. So now we're into what would be the 6th day of the race, and we have a long mountain bike leg to take us to a short trek with a rappel, and then more mountain biking, and then a big paddle out to the finish line on the coast. So again, we were in 2nd place. We were probably about 4 or 5 hours behind the leaders at this point. But we were pushing hard to get through. But again, on that mountain biking was highlighted. It was the heat again. It was just oppressive. It was really hot, and this is a great picture of what it looked like. But basically, any little river or creek we could find along the way, we would jump off our bikes and jump in and try and cool ourselves off. But that was definitely a challenging day. And now we're getting late in the race and getting close towards the end. So we got through the mountain biking, and then we started the final paddle, still in 2nd place. But our problem was we hadn't slept much the night before. And we arrived at the start of this paddle. It was probably about 10 o'clock at night. And we knew the finish line was only 40 kilometers away out in the ocean. So we knew we were going to have to push through this night and paddle to the finish. But we weren't in a good shape from the sleep deprivation side. So we pushed off and we tried to rotate sleeping as we were paddling, but it was quite rough. And one person was trying to sleep in the bottom of the canoe and the wave would crash over, it would wake you up, and it just didn't it didn't go well trying to catch sleep. And to make matters worse, we veered a little bit off our bearing. We were paddling out into the Pacific and we were on a compass bearing. I'll just go back a few slides. And you can kind of see there's some little islands that we were passing. So there were some islands with lights that we could use as markers, but we ended up paddling a little bit too far to the north on the bearing from kind of this island out to this island. We ended up out in this vicinity in the ocean, and it took us a little while to figure out where we were. And of course, this is when the waves really picked up, and our team, this was probably our worst moment as a team, trying to figure out where we were. And we're so close to the finish line. The stress was pretty high. we're yelling at each other about where to go and what to do. I was surprised they didn't show this in the show. But luckily we regrouped and we got to that checkpoint out there, checkpoint 31, just before the finish. And we found out we were still in second place, which was a huge relief. That paddle ended up taking us, I think, over 9 hours, and it would normally only take us maybe 5 or 6, just because we were suffering from the sleep deprivation so much. But this brings us to the finish, and here's our team paddling into the finish line after a horrific night. And here we are finishing the race, and of course the host was Bear Grylls. In the world's toughest race, which was really exciting for our team because it was our first time racing together. And a lot of the teams had written us off because we had 2 newcomers with Ryan and Rhea. But everyone just did such a great job on the team, and we got really cohesive as a team, and it worked out incredibly well for us. So here's the kind of the final leaderboard from the race, showing us up in second place there, which was pretty neat. So this also shows 40, it looks like 43 of the 66 teams ended up finishing. So we finished on what would have been the 7th morning of the race, and then the course was left open for another 4 days for teams to finish. So there we go.
Wow.
That's incredible. Wow.
Yeah, so that was our race. So I guess
Very good.
probably best to open it up for some questions.
Did you have to worry about wildlife?
Funny enough, Fiji's strange in that way. There are actually no really dangerous wild animals there. The most dangerous things were some eels that lived in their rivers that apparently could bite people, but I don't think there were any issues with that this year. And then there's wild boar, was kind of the most dangerous. But really, in Fiji, it was the things you couldn't see that were most dangerous. So all of the bacteria and viruses and things in the mud. And it really did play havoc with teams. I'd mentioned in 2002, we did the race there and we dropped out with the jungle foot rot. It was this really painful thing that basically ate the skin on the bottom of your feet. But teams this year really struggled with infections and keeping their wounds clean after they got small scrapes and things. And a lot of teams had a lot of the infections went septic after the race, and they ended up in hospitals for long periods of time. But that was kind of the worst thing from that island.
How long was the race, like distance-wise?
So I think the whole course was 660 kilometers. And I don't know what the breakdown was by by discipline. But normally in the events, we expect that we can cover anywhere from 100 to 150 kilometers a day is the general rule that we use. Now, of course, the terrain that you're going on plays a big part in that. And Fiji was just incredibly hilly. You were either going up or down, no matter what, and it really, really took its toll. So you probably weren't going as far as you might go in other parts of the world.
Is the when it's being filmed, et cetera, I sort of I don't have an appreciation of how, like, let's say you're trekking through the night and they're filming you. Do you not sort of get clues of what's going on just because of the production being done at the same time?
You know what? We actually I don't think they were expecting our team to do very well, so we never really had an embedded camera crew.
Okay.
But the teams that did, the camera crews are very good at kind of staying behind and letting you do your thing. But at the same time, a lot of those camera crews hadn't been through those sections either, and they were likely relying on the teams to get them out the other side as much as anything. But with that being said, the production was ridiculously large, and they had a headquarters based on the island, and each team carried a GPS tracking device, so they knew where we were at any given moment. And each camera crew also had one of those devices, so they could track their camera teams and find out where they were, and they could talk to them. We actually heard that they had hired an airplane to fly over the island 24 hours a day so that they could have radio coverage across the whole island, and so they wouldn't have to set up countless repeaters. So it was quite an astonishing production.
Wow.
Bob, do you
How much
see,
prep?
sorry,
Yep.
do you see yourself doing this with your kids at any point? I know there were a couple of teams there that did it with their like son and dad kind of thing, and it'd be cool to do that.
Yeah, well, my kids are quite young, but we have the makings of a perfect expedition racing team because my wife likes to participate in these sports. But I have a almost 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, so we're a few years away. I hope I could still do this when they're at an age where we might be able to. But yeah, there was another Canadian team. They actually had the girl on the team was 18 years old, and she was the youngest person in the race, and she was racing with her dad. They're from Winnipeg, and the other members of their team was another father and son, so it was a really neat team. They got a little bit of coverage in the show, but it would have been neat to see them more.
How old was the oldest person that was in it? Or
I believe they actually covered Team Stray Dogs, and they were all in their 60s, I believe.
Wow.
I'm not sure who the oldest on the team was, but probably mid 60s. And yeah, it was really incredible watching them. And then if you watch the show, there was another father and son, and the father was suffering from Alzheimer's, and he was trying to get through the course with his son. They were both very experienced expedition racers, but it was probably the most heartbreaking part of the show was watching that team and just the father-son dynamic play out on the race course.
And how much prep time and training did it take you to get ready for this?
Yeah. So we were training anywhere from probably 10 to 25 hours in a given week. That was just the physical training, the biking and the paddling and the running. And yeah, I'm from the Blue Mountains, so I was running up and down the ski hills and paddling in the bay and on the Beaver River and anywhere we could find. But the other aspect is the preparation and the logistics of all the gear and equipment, and that takes up a lot of time as well. I think we had, I don't know how many spreadsheets we had, but we each had over 200 pieces of equipment that went to the event, and countless gear boxes and our bike boxes. They were overflowing. So getting all that organized took a tremendous amount of time. And that was actually one thing our team excelled at, was the organizational side. And Ryan was actually quite good on our team sourcing the best gear and the lightest gear. And I'm positive that we had the lightest packs in the race that probably helped us as well.
So how heavy were your packs?
It depended on the leg. So for a climbing section where we were trekking, where we'd have to carry some harnesses and some helmets and some climbing equipment, they might have been maybe 10 to 15 pounds. So not very heavy at all. The biggest thing is the food that you start out with on that leg. It's quite heavy, of really high calorie, dense food. But yeah, not too bad. Maybe 15 pounds in that range.
But you were,
What are the financial aspects of the race?
Sorry?
What are the financial aspects of the race?
So for this race, and this is unusual because it was a television production, they actually gave each team a $50,000 stipend to attend. So to cover our travel and our gear expenses and different things. And when we got there, the hotel was provided and different things like that. So it was a completely different experience from the events that we're used to participating in, where we're paying an entry fee and paying for all our own travel. It really was a neat thing to be a part of from that regard. It was just an unbelievable experience.
so was there a prize for the winning teams or any kind of?
Yep. Yeah. So first place won $100,000 and we won $50,000 in second, which was
Great.
nice.
Good job.
I got to take our family on a little vacation afterwards, so it helped make up for the time. I was away for about 3 weeks, so it helped me a little bit with that debt I had incurred at home.
Did the producers make money?
I don't know. It was, for me, it was a real eye opener, and I have no idea. It was funded by Amazon, and they're trying to get subscribers for their Amazon Prime network. So they're in competition with Netflix and all these other guys. So how they monetize it and figure out if it was worthwhile, I have no idea. It blows my mind, the money that goes into a television production, and seeing it firsthand, I can't wrap my head around how they cover the cost for things like this. But I guess if enough people sign up for Amazon Prime, they figure it's worthwhile.
Okay.
Bob? Curious to know, so how far was the first team ahead of you in time
Oh, so
at the end?
yeah, they were, it turned out they were only an hour and a half ahead at the finish line. But they had, if you watch the show, episode 8 would be the show to watch for the finish line. The New Zealand team that won the event, their boat actually came apart. It basically fell apart on that final paddling leg. The AMA, the outrigger of their canoe, came off of the main part, and they ended up floating in the Pacific. They had to get rescued and taken to an island, and they brought them a replacement boat so they could continue on in the event. And apparently, we actually didn't know this. We were paddling and we had no idea. We thought they were 4 or 5 hours ahead. Apparently, once they got going again, we were really close to being side by side with them. But we had dug ourselves into such a hole on the 5th night with our sleep and not taking sleep and making that navigation mistake. It really hindered us on that last night. So, but yeah, they weren't that far ahead. And then the 3rd place team finished only 20 minutes behind us,
Wow.
believe it or not. And again, we had no idea. We were on the podium at the finish, and they asked us to wait for the 3rd place team to finish, and they said they should be there any minute. And our jaws just dropped, and we were just like, "Holy cow!" It was, and that's so close for a 7-day race.
Wow.
Bob, I'm gonna have to stop you there, and thank you so much for taking time out of your life again and sharing this experience. It's pretty awesome to see it and hear it from you. Love to have you back, maybe with your other teammate at some point, and keep doing what you're doing, because I'm inspired to go and ride for maybe 5 kilometers now. Probably 5. That's the most I'm willing to do. So thank you again, Bob.
No problem.